Well, for years, pastors have been the butt of jokes when it comes to sermon length. And it's with good reason, because who of us has never heard a pastor famously say "in conclusion" and then continue with their message for another 15 minutes? But today I want to dig in a little bit deeper and find out how long should a sermon actually be based on the numbers. We're going to dig into some of those, and I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts. Let's do this. Well, hey guys, my name is Thomas Costello. I'm the founder of ReachRight, and we put out new content like this each and every week. So if this is the kind of thing that you're into, it would mean a lot to me if you would hit that subscribe button down below. And in addition to founding ReachRight, I've also been a pastor of a church for most of my adult life, and I have learned a few things over the years, but I still think there were some questions around how long is the right length of a sermon. I think all of us have been through one of those hour and 15-minute sermons there, and sometimes you're really starting to feel hungry as the sermon hopefully nears an end. And I remember another time when I had a new preacher speak at my church, and he had a sermon that he thought was going to go for 45 minutes and wound up being about 12. So there has to be some kind of a balance in there, but I wanted to dig in a little bit to what some of the numbers are saying. According to a 2017 study from the National Association of Evangelicals, they found that the average sermon length in the United States was right at 30 minutes, with the range being somewhere between 20 and 45 minutes for the vast majority of churches. That's what churches are actually doing, but Lifeway actually did another study where they wanted to determine how long does the average churchgoer think a message should be. And here's what they found. 27% prefer a sermon in the 20 to 30 minute range, and that was the largest of any group. 25% prefer a 30 to 40 minute sermon. 14% prefer a very short sermon of 15 to 20 minutes. And 9% prefer a message that is 40 to 50 minutes. There were very small other percentages that preferred under 15-minute sermons and over 50-minute sermons, which I found a little bit surprising because there's a lot of churches out there that still preach for over 50 minutes, even though the numbers seem to show that a vast majority of church members do not prefer that length. The study also found that churchgoers were twice as likely to say that their pastor preached too long, 27% of them said that, as they were to say that their pastor preached for too short a time. Only 13% of churchgoers had that to say. So what the numbers seem to show is that there's a slight disconnect in that churches tend to preach a little longer than church members tend to feel like they should. And that fits in really well with a lot of the data that we're seeing about attention spans nowadays. According to Dr. John Medina, in his book Brain Rules, he found that the average American adult attention span is only 10 minutes long. And other research in his book echoed that students' level of attention and engagement decreases rapidly at about the 10 to 15 minute mark into any lecture. It's no coincidence that formats like TED Talks are doing so well, where they have a very strict 18-minute limit. So if the researchers are telling us that most of our church members would rather our sermons be a little bit shorter than we're preaching, and if all the data seems to show that attention spans are much higher when we can keep our messages shorter, it might make sense for us to really consider shortening up our messages and probably getting into that 30-minute window if at all possible. So I want to unpack 3 reasons why you should probably consider going shorter with your sermons instead of going longer. Here's the first one. Shorter sermons lead to greater message impact, and I totally believe this to be the case. When we go on for 30 or 40 minutes, sometimes we have this idea that I'll probably say something that resonates with them, and if this doesn't work, they'll probably get something out of this other part of the message. When in reality, it's probably better for us to have one central theme in every one of our sermons that we really have a laser focus on. When we keep our messages short, we can keep ourselves laser focused on that exact topic, and that always is the best way to make an impact. So short messages force us to hone in on the exact point that we want to make and give laser focused applications for our members to put into their lives. The second reason why you should choose shorter sermons is because it's better for the digital world that we live in right now. One of the mistakes that I see so many churches making with their sermon content after they go through all the steps of recording and filming their video and editing their videos and getting them ready to go on the internet is only leaving them as 30 to 40 or maybe even 50 or 60-minute chunks that have to be digested in a world where most video content are on platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels, and they're under 1 minute minute long. And I understand some of the pushback you might be thinking. Believe me, I understand that as a pastor as well. I think messages need to be heard in their entirety, but there is great value in shorter versions of these messages and being able to get across a spiritual point in a matter of seconds, if not a matter of minutes. So even if you are preaching 30 or 40-minute messages, it is really one of the biggest opportunities we have right now for you to trim those messages down and get them into a format that would work well on YouTube Shorts, on TikTok, and on Instagram and Facebook Reels. These are huge platforms right now that will greatly expand your reach, and you really need to be taking advantage of those. Third and finally, I think that shorter messages are great because they give a more holistic worship experience to someone that's at your church, especially those that are there for the first time. Now, as a pastor and someone who's delivered hundreds of sermons on Sunday mornings, I love to think that my sermon is the main reason why someone feels a connection with our church. But the reality is there are all kinds of ways that people feel a connection. And to my dismay, many of them don't feel that the sermon is necessarily the most important part. Having shorter sermons allows us to put more time into our worship experience, or it helps us to maybe put more focus on our children's ministry and the things that are happening there. Shorter sermons give us more opportunity to put the emphasis on other aspects of our church family and our worship service, and that can be a big win, especially when it comes to first-time visitors. Now, it's easy to say those three things, and I think a lot of us understand, yeah, it would be good if I can go shorter, but let's face it, it's hard, especially for us as pastors, to go shorter with our messages, especially if we've built up this muscle memory of preaching for 40 or 50 minutes every single week. I have two quick tips that I just wanted to share with you that I used when I tried to take myself from about 40-minute sermons to get down under that 30-minute threshold. Number one, begin with the end in mind. Every time I write a sermon, I start out with the question of, what do I want my audience to walk away with? What is the one central theme that someone needs to know as a result of hearing this message that I'm going to deliver? When we have that central theme in mind, it helps us keep our focus as we're writing our messages, and it can keep us from going off on any tangents that might not help us in reinforcing that one central theme, that one point that we're trying to make. The second tip I have for you is edit. Here's my process as I go through writing a whole sermon. I'm not a manuscript person, but I have a very extensive set of bullet points, usually about 3 pages single spaced. But when I'm getting ready to preach, I want to get that edited down to a one-sheeter of notes. We have a whole video about preaching without notes. If you're bold enough to give that a try, you can take a look at that here. But once I have it edited down to 1 page, that's when the practice starts to come in. I actually do exactly what I'm doing right now. I stare right at the camera and I actually deliver my message to just my camera, and I time myself while I do it, and I really try to get down under that 30-minute mark in my practice sessions. I know that when I'm speaking on an actual Sunday morning, I tend to go a little bit longer than I do in my practice, so I need to get under that 30-minute threshold if I want to be close to 30 minutes on Sunday morning. So practice in front of a camera and edit yourself down. Watch yourself back. It is a really good practice to get into, and it'll help you really hone your message and focus on what you have to say. But these are just a couple of my tips. I have a couple of questions for you as we wrap up. Number one, how long do you preach for? I'd love to hear down in the comments if you think I'm wrong, and I'm sure some of you do. This is a very controversial topic. And secondly, what tips do you have to shorten your messages? Do you write a manuscript? Do you write notes? Do you practice in front of a camera? I'd love to hear how you get prepared, and as always, we'll catch you next time.